welcome everybody to Alacadia's LinkedIn Live. Today it's a Basecamp to Everest, marketing's ROI journey or journey to ROI. So I'm Sam Melnick. I am the Vice President of Customer Success and Insights here at Alacadia. And I am joined by Lori West, who is the Vice President of Marketing Operations and Technology at Genpact. I'm going to let Lori do a little bit better of an introduction in a moment, but I want to first talk about marketing ROI. So I think it's one of these things. I'm really excited to dig in with Lori. We've got a couple of these sessions coming up this week, but the reality is it's not really a one-size-fits-all approach to marketing ROI. We can come up with equations, we can talk about what's possible, but each organization and how they take on marketing ROI, what technologies they use, who they have to engage internally, it's going to be kind of different. However, that's not to say you can't learn from your peers. You absolutely should learn from your peers because there's things that each organization is going to have to go through and challenges or roadblocks that they're going to hit. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't take the time to learn from smart people like Lori who have paid their dues and kind of taken on some of this journey. So Lori, why don't I stop rambling and you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your organization at Genpact, about the marketing organization. Kind of give us that overview.
Sure thing. So as you said, I'm Lori West. I'm the Vice President of Marketing Operations and Technology with Genpact. I've been with Genpact for about 6 years now. I have about 20 years or so, age myself, in marketing overall, predominantly in professional services organizations and predominantly within technology and automation arenas. With Genpact, I started about 6 years ago, as I said. Genpact, if you don't know, we're about 100,000 people strong, and we are a professional services firm that specializes in digital transformation. The marketing team in the 6 years I've been there has changed quite dramatically. I think back to when I started, we were a very small, lean team, focused a lot on thought leadership. We had a lot of offline marketing activities that we would engage in from a vertical and a horizontal perspective. You fast forward now to 2021, and especially with everything that happened last year, the majority of what we do is online. We have everything focused on connected journeys, predominantly from online channels, predominantly culminating with a website experience. So therefore, generating a lot of data for us to play in.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, it's like you started this journey before COVID hit, so you kind of got a leg up, but everybody had to move on to that journey. So it's great that you kind of had that start. When you think of like channel aside, I mentioned this in my intro, ROI is going to be kind of different for every organization. When it comes to Genpact and your marketing organization and your marketing leadership and CMO, what does ROI mean to you all?
Yeah, it's a really good question because it can mean a lot of different things applied in a lot of different ways across the marketing stack. I think at the top level, it's really the strategic way that we view our activities and benchmark against, the performance that we're driving. So it's really assessing the investment in time, resource, pure budget in the activities that we're driving versus the impact that we're generating, and all of it with a view of, how we can take and learn to invest in the future. So I think at the topmost level, that's how we would look at ROI. And then, of course, within all of that, we go super granular, as does everyone, I think. And you start looking at not just the ROI on it, but also the attribution elements to it and how you can improve interactions, how you can increase engagement, what's going on with the inflow, how you can improve operational efficiencies, et cetera.
Does every ROI measurement and view, like you talk about multiple levels, which is, I think, a great best practice and something to think about. There's not one end all be all ROI number or metric, but does every ROI metric have a dollar input and a revenue or pipeline output, or do you look at it in other ways?
Yeah, I think we have to look at it in other ways. If I think about the top level scorecard that we have within our marketing team, we have it broken down in various ways. We look at reputation, we look at demand creation, we look at customer engagement, and some of those are very easily quantifiable, and some of them are not. Some of them are you can't very directly take it down to a dollar amount. So we do look at each individual thing, and we determine, at the onset, what it is that we're looking to drive. Is it an uplift in web traffic? Is it, awareness points from a brand program? So we do take a look at each individual thing that we're doing, and we set forth, what we believe is the return that we're looking for, and we contextualize it so we can say, are we looking year on year? Are we looking, program to program? Are we looking at, pure uplifts year on year, so that we know whether or not a data point that we're putting forward is actually good?
That's great. And we didn't prep for that one, I don't think, but I was hoping you would say that. And usually we're on the same page, but that's one of the bigger mistakes that I see marketing organizations make is sometimes they're getting pushed to prove marketing's work. So they try and put everything into some sort of dollar or pipeline amount, or they want to be known as revenue driven marketer. So everything has to be tied to revenue. But the reality is, I like how you put it, and like how we talk about it at Allocadia often, is this idea of intent, not like intent data like some technology providers, but what is your intent? And you kind of talked about this I'm always taking notes. So if I'm looking down, it's my note. But like, what's the intent of the activities, the people, the dollars, and then what is the benchmark, or what are we trying to hit with that? And intent can be, reputation or brand loyalty or something like that, as long as you've stated that and you're measuring to it. Did you get any pushback from, or have you, from like finance counterparts or sales or even other people within marketing when you try and define ROI in that manner?
No, I mean, we have a scorecard that has, it has a variety of measures, and if you look at all of the scorecards, individual scorecards, even, they all ladder straight up. So our CMO's ladders up to our CEO, and mine ladders up to hers. So there is an element of it, of the financial, and then there's an element of all of the customer engagement, of the brand, of press or analyst relations, or whatever it is that we're specifically accountable for, because all of them play together. It's all of those things working in tandem that are actually going to end up driving that inflow.
And I love how you just talked about that, and I'm glad that you haven't got pushback, but it sounds like how you've set up goals in your scorecards ladders up. So that's the other thing. It's like you provide the context around, okay, here's how we look at our business and our individual owners, and this is how they ladder up. And some of it's going to be pipeline or very revenue driven specific, but some of it's not. But ultimately, as long as you can make those connection point around goals and metrics, you can usually get buy-in. So I think that is a great approach, and it sounds like it's working for you all, at least fairly well. There's always tweaks.
There's no mistakes.
So, talk to us about kind of your journey. We talk like this whole LinkedIn Live. It's like the journey, Basecamp to Everest. Like, it's not like one day you walked in, you popped open your BI, or you like hit a button, you're like, oh, there's ROI. Talk to us about a little bit about what it takes and about how long too.
Yeah. When you first approached me with this, I thought back to the very beginning, and it was about 3 years ago, I think, that team members and I sat down to look at where did we want to be and what it was going to take to get there, and we started little bits at a time. So we started all the way back at the beginning, at the very base level, in terms of data, contact data, lead data. And we worked hard on our database, MDM. We stood up a team. We had, made sure we had a team on hygiene and accuracy and enrichment, and making sure that we had our CRM in tip-top form. So we wanted to make sure that we had all of the filters in our CRM system that would actually drive to what we were trying to accomplish from a reporting element, and connect to the various tools that we wanted to introduce into the ecosystem. So that was the very base level that we started it on. And then we started slowly bringing in the new areas. So, with our CRM system all buttoned up, then we could look at, okay, how can we automate now to look at what we're driving from an inflow perspective? And we pulled in our data visualization tool, and we set up all of those rules and macros that we could have that real-time view of our data and what we're driving from an inflow perspective. Then we slowly started introducing and connecting the channels so that we could look at a channel view. Still very disparate. So we were looking at, paid media and the impressions and the pay-per-clicks, but that was separate from the rest of the journey, which is where we had set out at the very beginning. That's where we wanted to be. I think it was beginning of 2020 that we implemented Allocadia. And had three main goals on that one. Yes. For us, it was the very first and rudimentary getting everybody off their spreadsheets so we could all have a centralized view. But also it was so that we could take our budget and dissect it, use all of those meta tags and the filters in Allocadia to say, okay, within our total budget, how much are we spending on creation of a campaign versus the activation of the campaign? And is that the right way we should be thinking about our budget? So that was kind of our rudimentary view into our very first steps into being able to really pick apart the ROI and be able to dissect it down to a very granular level. And then, of course, we were looking at it from the full campaign perspective as well. And then at the same time we did that, we worked on taxonomy, which is probably where we spent the majority of our time in terms of the whole roadmap on where we wanted to go. Taxonomy was huge for us. And it wasn't just it was as basic as making sure that everybody in the team was aligned to what a program was versus a campaign versus an activation versus a tactic. But then it was also really looking at every single solitary piece in the data of tech that we have, making sure that the fields mapped up. And over time, how we took a vertical that we called banking and financial services years ago is now banking and capital markets. So guess what? The acronyms didn't line up. If you start looking all the way back, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't even align the data up. So we spent a lot of time on the cleanup of everything to make sure that we had standardized ways of calling, each channel, each tactic, each vertical, and then also the UTMs. And how we build out a UTM, the order with which we have the UTM, all of the various ways that we would want to cut our data down and segment it and filter it. So we spent a lot of time in that arena, and now we're finally at that point where it's starting to pay off, because we were able to take, with that work completed, we can now say, now I can see my click from a paid ad all the way onto my website, all the pages that individual visited, the fact that they filled out a web form, and that now we've gone through a bid process and they're in a down select. So it took a bit, so that, we're finally now at that point. So we're still not at the top of Everest, Sam, but we're getting closer.
Well, I mean, I can remember I wrote on paper or white paper, report, whatever, on data strategy and the journey behind it. And I think this was, you'd started, but it was still more of a twinkle in your eye. Whereas now, there's some tangible stuff around it. And that, you talked about, and I'll talk about, because we interviewed, I don't know, a dozen or so, half a dozen, maybe a dozen or so people like Lori for this, but what you just talked about revalidates what we found when we did this research, was that a lot of time is taken on what I would call data strategy and data model, and not modeling the data per se, but what is the data model that is going to provide the reports and the insights you need. Because if you start without having a clear concept of what you want the outcome be, and if you don't understand what systems have what fields, you kind of hit that ROI button after a year or whatever of work, and the data can't come together. So it's you go slow to go fast, because I'm sure it took you a year or two just to get all the right people in the room, everyone to agree on it. Oh, why do we call this banking and whatever you said versus banking and this? But then once you have those defined, it's okay, let's get them in the systems, let's integrate, let's automate, let's get it in let's design the dashboards. Sound familiar? Am I accurate?
Oh, you're very accurate, actually. It's amazing the complexity and trying to get a standardization. Even in a UTM, you're like, oh, because each channel has their own way of managing their channel views and how they do their day to day. That are also reliant upon the UTM, but don't ladder back up into the big picture. And so we had to be able to go, okay, here's the big picture and what we need, and here's all of the things downstream that you need. And then, of course, you end up in such a way that we ended up with human error, and we're like, and so now we've got a project in place to automate the creation of the UTM code, so that it gets really locked down, so that it is, you go in and you say, this is what I want to do, and these are the parameters with which I want to measure it. And then here's the UTM code that is developed for you. And then that gets used across all of the various channels so that we eliminate any room for error moving forward in that capacity.
I think that's a key point as well, because what I found when I talk with folks, you kind of start with almost manual, whether it's bringing data together or whether it's UTM codes. Then you move to, oh, there's an error here, or I can automate that. So it's almost like semi-automated. You automate the low-hanging fruit, and then you move to fully automated. And like some of it may never be fully automated because it's not possible. You need human input, whatnot. But it's like a layer on top of the already complex process, but it's a part of that. Whereas people who go right to automation, it's just not possible. And you also can't figure out like where are the breaking points, because you want to figure out the breaking points manually. Because when you hit automate and then it's broken, then you're like QA.
You're really chasing backwards. Yeah, exactly.
Who did you have to get in the room? Like, who were the people you engaged internally? Like, it's not necessarily about, hey, let's go get Allocadia and an attribution vendor. And it's more like, first, it's like, how do we agree on metrics and taxonomy? Who did you engage there internally?
Yeah, so I think from a metrics perspective and an ROI perspective, it was really sitting down with the various leaders of their domain. So at the very beginning was the individual that runs our go-to-market. So a lot of time spent there, because he was the one who was responsible for all of the data, and to say, hey, how are we doing? Are we doing well? Are we not doing well? So spent a lot of time there looking at what are the key measures and how do we need to separate those? Do we need to look at them by audience? Do we need to look at them by geography? Do we need to look at them by, vertical, like whatever that slice and that needs to be? And then it was looking at the channel owners to say, okay, for the editorial team, if we have a piece of content, do you want to see how it performs on this channel versus this channel? Is it performing, at the top of the funnel or the middle of the funnel or the bottom of the funnel? So, we spent a lot of time trying to understand all of those various elements. And I think we're still learning. I mean, I find that probably the most exciting thing with all of the data is that the more you get into it, the more you realize, like, oh my gosh, I could take it another step further and get another dimension to this that will help provide more of a holistic picture of what's going on.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think starting with what's the measurements or even what decision you're trying to make starts you down that path. We've got a few minutes left. I got a question that came in. So, somebody who, we just went over a bunch of stuff in about 15 minutes, all great stuff. You've obviously been, you've really thought through it and you've done a great job here. But trying to boil it down, if someone came to you and say, hey, go back to Lori 3 years ago, what's one piece of advice you'd give to somebody trying to figure out how to approach ROI at their organization? Only one. We're only letting you do one.
Yeah. Consider the time you think it's going to take you and then double it so that you have patience. I think, we set out, the one thing I think we did right in it was that we looked at bite-sized pieces rather than, trying to get everything done, because it's an impossibility. We're still striving for an end goal. And every time we think we met the end goal, I've discovered something else I would like to do. So it extends the goal and makes the Everest go higher, if you will. But I think that making sure that you have realistic milestones, releases, you celebrate those along the way. I think those are the advice that I would give.
I think that's great advice. And I think Oh, 3 years. Oh, it's a lot of work. But what you said about milestones, I see this consistently with my customers, our customers who are, I don't want to say successful, but getting value and happy with their journey around ROI. Is there realistic that, hey, there's going to be a milestone once we clean up Salesforce so that the data is usable? There's going to be a milestone once we have investment data in Allocadia that's reconciling with financial systems that have, pivots around geos or product lines, and we're going to see value along the way. And yeah, the big star, like a huge, the big win is when we get that first look of ROI, but it doesn't mean we're not going to get value along the way. And being clear and celebrating those milestones is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as we were looking at one of the very early wins for us and looking at things was when we automated our inflow. And, we could sit back and celebrate and say, oh my gosh, what used to take us 35 hours worth of manually manipulating data to get all of these cuts, we can just now log in.
And what do you mean by inflows, just so that everyone listening?
Yeah, pipeline.
Yeah. This is great. I'm going to ask one obligatory Allocadia question. When you look at this ROI journey, where does Allocadia fit in, and how does it relate to some of the other technologies as part of your stack and as part of this, I guess, journey or approach?
Yeah. So Allocadia was one of the earlier pieces within the journey, as I said. So we really wanted to look at not just the return against a program, but we did want to look at individually how we were spending the money and make more informed decisions on, were we spending too much in one area and not enough in another area, et cetera. So that was probably our very first win with Allocadia, that and financial close and alignment with our finance team, like this. Beautiful, beautiful things. But now if you take a look at the way that the tech is set up, in order for you to update in Allocadia anything, add a line, you do have to attribute it to a program, a campaign, an activation, a tactic. And so and it automatically will pull in a lot of the meta tagging for you, so you don't have to do that. And so we have that automated view of how we want to be able to slice and dice that data, against the whole program goals that we've set in our data visualization tool. And then we also have a few other things that can get set up in there as well. But it is a central piece to it that's connected directly into our systems to help us be able to see those. We're right at the cusp. we're still at that last little piece to be able to plug it all back in, and get an automated view that says, okay, at the program level, here's the total spend and everything that falls within it. I got them two separate systems right now, but the data's all there. We're just working on that connection.
Yeah, I mean, the larger and more matrixed an organization is, the harder these things are. Matrix both organizationally structured, but like functionally as well. So it's not uncommon, but of course we want to see that happen. And what else would you say is in your ROI tech stack that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, sure. I'll name drop everything. Yeah, so we did implement Visible this year, which was a big one. And so a big unlock to be able to see what's going on within the full journey. So how customers are behaving and engaging with us at the top of the funnel versus downstream, how an existing client is engaging versus a new prospect client. So it's giving us a little bit more richer of view there. And it was also enabled us to get away from a last touch attribution, which, is fine if you want to just look at your last touch. So we now have the ability to pivot back and forth and look at, if I'm looking at a prospect account, it is the first touch that's super important for me to be able to bring that back to sales to say, hey, look, this is the first touch and this is, a new prospect, versus if it's an existing account and you really want to look at the bottom of the funnel and where we're helping a salesperson drive the opportunity forward. So that was that's a big one for us.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, we we see them, we see other attribution. I think that's like getting that, it's like a next level. It's like a next level. It's like once you've proven out that you can bring the data together, now you want to see different views, first touch versus last touch. Maybe there's some sort of custom model or an even weighted because they answer different questions. So not uncommon to see that one.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. I think we can close up in a moment. I'll ask, what was the hardest part? So we'll close with that. Like, what was that part that you're like, man, that took a lot, but we got through it. Maybe you're still working on it.
No, it was absolutely setting the data infrastructure and all of that taxonomy. It was, we'd think we got to a point, and then when we'd start to, try to do scenarios with it, just whiteboard it out, we'd find it would break. And so that probably was the most painstaking piece of it. And we got through it. But then there was as I said, there was a human error, and so now we've redone it, tightened it up, and we're automating it to eliminate it. But that was absolutely the toughest piece.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. As always, it's a pleasure to learn and hear from you. It truly is a journey, and we're glad to be partners with you on this. But really impressive stuff. As I say it to you every time, you're like, and I'm like, yeah, it is. You're doing great. So thank you for your time. Thanks for the partnership. Thanks for sharing with everyone. Yeah. And then for everybody who's listening, we do have another one of these sessions coming up later this week. It's with Richard Weslinchuk, which I'm sure I got his name slightly wrong, but that's all right. He'll correct me later this week when we talk. And he runs marketing operations, actually revenue operations at Visier. And we'll have a similar conversation around their journey to ROI. So you'll be able to learn, hopefully if you attend both or listen to both, you'll be able to learn a little bit about two different perspectives on ROI and how to get there. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Lori. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.